Hello, my name is Cami Wynn, and this is for my week 8 lesson plan and video for reading comprehension of informational text. So let's get started. By the end of this lesson, students should be able to summarize and be able to do the vocabulary strategies, as well as have the ability to coordinate some of the strategies to guide comprehension. Okay, so you're going to show the students a copy of the CSR strategies teaching chart and tell the students that you'll begin teaching them collaborative strategic reading, or CSR for short. Explain the term by telling students that collaborative means working together and that strategic reading is a plan or a strategy for understanding and remembering what is being read. So there's two parts to these strategies. One is click and clunk, and for click, it's as if the student understands it. For clunk, it is the one that students do not understand. Then there is also get the gist, where they have to figure out what the passage is trying to say to them. Lastly, there is wrap up, and this is where students use this after reading to kind of help summarize as well. Okay. For this lesson, I chose to use the passage Pioneers on the Oregon Trail. First of all, you want to try and have the students do a preview of the passage. So you would first start out with scanning a text, brainstorming what you already know about the topic, and predicting what you will learn. So for scanning, what you would do is you'd say, I'll begin my preview by scanning the first page. I see it as title is The Pioneer on the Oregon Trail at the top of the page. This is the topic of the selection. Then I see two bold-faced headings which say The Way West and Backpacking for the Journey. And then there's also, I see a sidebar with italicized text in it. The text is a quote, and below the quote, I see a picture of a covered wagon. At the bottom of the page, I see a timeline of historical events. Next part is for brainstorming what you know. So you're going to point to the heading on the teaching chart and say, using what you saw during my scan of the text, you then brainstorm what you already know about the topic. From cowboy movies, I know that pioneers travel in covered wagons. I also know that pioneers traveled from east to west. And as you brainstorm, record your ideas on the board. Next section, predict what you will learn. So then you're going to point to the heading on the teaching chart. And then after you think about what you already know about the topic, you predict what you will learn from what you are reading. Predictions are based on clues in the text in which you already know. When you make a prediction, you even tell what makes you think so. Based on the title, headings, pictures of the covered wagon, I predict I will learn about pioneers. Based on the second heading, I predict that one of the things we will learn is how and what the pioneers packed for their journey, And then as you generate these predictions, make sure you also write them down for the students. Okay, so like I said, for click and clunk, what you would do is you would begin reading the passage and you would ask students after a while, are things clicking? And they should say yes or no. If they say yes, that's great. So then if they say no, then you ask them, okay, so what is a clunk for you? And it could be a vocabulary word, it could be a way a sentence is worded, different things like that. It's just a strategy for us to understand their form of comprehension for this unit. Next, getting the gist. You want to remind students that good readers can identify most important ideas when they are reading. They can shrink the information into a paragraph and to a main idea statement that tells the most important idea. So this is where the students would read, and then you would give them a chance to come up with 10 words or less what they would put there about the passage that they have read. Okay, so now we're at the wrap-up stage, and at this point, you're going to point to the heading on the CSR chart that you have and explain to students that after reading, they will wrap up. And so tell them that the wrap-up has two parts. It has asking and answering questions and reviewing what they have learned. And when you want to make sure that you ask this for whenever you're doing the ask and answering questions for the wrap-up section. When you ask and answer questions, you will think about kinds of questions the teacher might ask for on the test. And then for the second part, which would be review what you learned, you want to say in the second part of your wrap-up, you review by noting the important information that you have learned. So at this point, students can go back to their brainstorm ideas at the very beginning and throughout the text as they went along. And this is where they would come up with some sort of summary as well. And of course, you can do this for guided practice as well. So this is where you can go back over different parts of the pioneers on the Oregon Trail part, and you can go through different parts of that and work through the guided practice section on the page. It's very similar to what I just explained here. They go through brainstorming, predicting what they know, the click and clunk versus get the gist. You'll also go under the wrap-up, which is where they would ask the questions that they would ask, a teacher would ask, basically. And then they'll also review what they learned. For error correction, what I would do for this lesson, if a student misunderstood terms or concepts of click and clunk or get the gist, teachers could restate what each of the terms mean. For example, if a student doesn't understand what clunk means, they could say, well, if click means to understand, then clunk means to, and then you could kind of explain it maybe like the clunking of a car is not always a good thing. So then you could explain it, when you feel like you're kind of bumpy on your road to reading, you can explain it like your car is going clunk, clunk, clunk. That would be an example that you could give them if they were having trouble with that term. And for my instructional considerations for my ELL students, I would pick a simpler text and then pair them with a student who speaks proficient English. This goes back to the lesson that we learned last week about para-reading. It would help them focus on the words that maybe they can't pronounce and also work on their English as well. For my special education students, I would also maybe pick a simpler text for them to read, and then I could also print off a copy of what the terms are as far as click and clunk, things like that, that are covered in this lesson in case they do forget or they have trouble focusing on it. And lastly, I would do for my talented and gifted students. For these students, I would give them a little harder text to read and have them produce questions for other students to answer, besides what would be asked of the teacher. So, for example, I would have them kind of in a way come up with some of the questions that I would be asking them. This would also help them to have a sense of leadership in the classroom, and it would be really good for them in the long run. So I hope you enjoyed my lesson, and I look forward to your feedback. Thank you.